By early August 1940, the Battle of Britain was a month old. The Germans had started by battering Channel ports and naval convoys. The British mainland would soon be next. For the first time in its history, Britain would be fighting an air battle over home soil. A battle that, if lost, would see Britain removed from the war. Fighter Command was only 5 years old, but now it held the fate of the nation in its hands. Its job was brutally simple: to ensure national survival. Over the last couple of weeks, 4 young pilots have been battling for a unique aviation prize, a 9-hour course in a real World War II Spitfire. Our pilots first had to prove themselves on Tiger Moths, the same type of plane used by original Battle of Britain trainee pilots. 2 were then selected to move on to Duxford, where they got 3 hours at the controls of Carolyn Grace's Mark 9 Spitfire. It was civilian pilot Dave Mallon who then won through to the final leg of the competition. So over the next week, he will be learning 2 key Battle of Britain skills: how to fly the Spitfire in tight formation, and then, the most demanding one of all, the aerobatics essential to air combat survival. But first comes navigation. Today's sortie will be a flight all the way to the south coast of England. Briefing him is Spitfire pilot Carolyn Grace.
I thought it would be really significant that now that you've got to this stage, that we'd go down to the area where the battle was really at its peak. So we take a flight down to the south coast. We're in 12 group area here, Duxford. So we'd come down past Stansted, past Stapleford, and head down into the south via the Thames estuary, obviously. I mean, all the way.
The route Dave will be flying will take him through skies rich in Battle of Britain memories. It was here, over London, Kent and Surrey, that the Battle of Britain was fought and won. The RAF was always outnumbered, but in the end, what proved decisive were British strategy and the leadership that conceived and implemented it. This was a battle fought as much on the ground as in the air. There was little to separate the aircraft or the pilots who flew on either side, but where the RAF and the Luftwaffe were utterly and significantly different was in their leaders. In the summer of 1940, Fighter Command was facing what people considered the most formidable air force in the world. The German Luftwaffe had been unbeatable, something its leader, Hermann Goering, boasted would never stop.
Goering was an experienced airman in his own right. He had been an air ace during the First World War. He had won the highest award for bravery. He had been in command of the Richthofen Squadron, which was the prime squadron. And he joined the Nazi Party very shortly afterwards, so he was an old fighter, as Hitler had it. And Hitler, in 1933, when he came to power, made Goering responsible for what was going to be his prime weapon, the Luftwaffe. And he developed it according to his own lights.
It was his Luftwaffe that he had created, and he saw it in his terms, very much as the World War I fighter pilot, not with a great technical understanding, and with a view that his Luftwaffe would achieve almost anything, and that would greatly strengthen his position in the German hierarchy.
There's a huge myth about Goering that he was a kind of the amiable face of Nazism. Actually, he was a ruthless killer, capable of any kind of brutality. He was a convinced, corrupt supporter of the Nazi regime.
He was known in the Luftwaffe as Der Dicke, which simply means old fatso.
He was rather a sort of grotesque figure. He dressed up in these extravagant comic opera uniforms. He wore togas. He carried a spear. He had jeweled belts. He had corsets. Somebody described him as a manicured mountain of powdered flab.
We reported in at Goering's office. He wasn't there. He was on his way back from Paris. And then he arrived in civilian clothes, wearing a raw silk shirt with puff sleeves, a raw silk cravat with a great big emerald on it here, and riding breeches with red boots. Even by today's standards, it was a pretty daring get-up.
I think when Goering said that his Luftwaffe could take Britain out of the war, given what it had achieved in Poland and in France, Hitler was prepared to let him see if he could do that. It suited everybody. The German army and the German navy were not at that stage ready to invade, and here was Goering saying, I can do the whole thing for you with my Luftwaffe. Hitler would have been stupid not to let him get on and see if he could do it.
What Goering needed to achieve was air supremacy. This meant destroying the RAF's ability to oppose his aircraft, precisely the tactic that had brought France to its knees earlier in 1940.
The plan was to knock the RAF out. Once you have air superiority, then they could initiate the invasion.
What Goering thought he could do was to render the southeast of England defenceless from the air by building up the pressure on the RAF and threatening to bomb London. Goering wanted to be able to apply the force and told Hitler that the Luftwaffe could deal with the RAF fairly quickly, and that all he needed was about a week of good weather.
But despite his promise to Hitler, Goering had no real plan of how to achieve this. He hadn't thought he had needed one. Send his fighters over, and they would destroy any plane that came up to challenge them.
Essentially, the idea was that our fighter boys are so good, and the 109 is such a fantastic machine, that as long as we can get the British fighters into the air, our chaps will shoot them down in droves, and that'll be the end of it. And of course, it wasn't like that.
Goering had failed to allow for two decisive facts, not just the calibre of fighters the RAF would throw against them, but just how well organised and professional British air defence really was.
Okay, speed on traffic.
Thank you.
As Dave heads down towards Kent, he is flying into the heart of what was once the best defended airspace in the world.
Okay, so oil pressure is good. Ground temp is good. Oil temperature, please.
80, so that's
Okay,
fine.
and fuel.
Just veer a little bit to the right, just a fraction.
Bit
To the right.
Okay.
And level out there.
The man responsible for the system that would shatter the myth of Luftwaffe invincibility could not have been more different from Goering. The head of Fighter Command in 1940 was a dour Scot by the name of Hugh Dowding.
Dowding was a career airman. He had come into the Air Force right at the start of the First World War. He had continued to serve throughout the interwar period. He was a consummate professional who was nearing the end of his career. He was highly respected, but his nickname was Stuffy, which I think says it all.
Hugh Caswell Tremenhere Dowding, magnificent name. He was a very meticulous fellow, enormous attention to detail, immense patience.
He was a calm, rather imperturbable individual, not liked a lot by people, but I think that for once this was a British commander in the right place at the right time.
Dowding didn't really lead his men into battle. He played a role much more like the chairman of the board and left operational control to his group commanders.
He had a very clear view of his role, which was simply to provide the air defence of Britain at all costs.
Dowding created what was by far the most formidable air defence system in the world. And the great thing was that most people didn't realise that he'd done that, at least for Goering.
During the 1930s, Dowding quietly went about building an air defence system around southern England. Whilst most people were transfixed by the development of the new generation of fighters, it was Dowding's genius to realise that the most important task was to find the best way in which to use them.
What emerges, in fact, is that in our finest hour, the British behaved in the way in which